Hello and welcome to Thrive, a wellbeing podcast for the students of Alexandra College. So, Una, would you like to tell us a little bit about the history of Alexandra College?
Alexandra College Dublin occupies a very unique place in the evolution of women's education. Way back at the time of our inception, it was considered unnatural and flying in the face of providence for women to be anything more than bearers of the next generation. And Alexandra College came along and said, we don't buy into this. They were modelled on King's College in London, but we brought it a bit further and we started fighting for the right for women to go on to third level education. And this was unheard of. We were insulted, denigrated, termed blue stockings, which was a really derogatory term. And there was a lot of jealousy because at the time, a school survived by doing well in their exams and getting money for it. So as Alex started to really flourish and as the girls big time bought into achieving and showing that girls were capable of not just second level but third level education, the Catholic Archbishop of Dublin, Archbishop Cullen at the time, made very derogatory comments and said that Alex just cherry-picked the best brains and it wasn't anything to do with our actual ability to teach or our girls' ability to learn. But Henrietta White in 1892 started bringing in subjects like philosophy, psychology, higher level English. She was way ahead of her time and she brought lecturers from Trinity in, and this is why we're called Alexandra College. So she started third level courses for girls to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, something we now all know, something that statistically has been proven, that girls are more than well capable of attaining that form of education. And then there was an ongoing battle with Trinity and UCD who wouldn't let women near the place. We were termed devils in skirts and they wouldn't let women cross the threshold. But as time progressed, with a number of public battles and also with the results the Alex girls showed, it became very obvious that third level education could no longer be denied to women. So the fact all of us here today, so Orla, Alex, myself, I was able to do an MLit as well as an honours degree. All of that, Alex opened those doors for women. We were at the forefront of that movement and we have a unique, rich position in the whole evolution of women's education. So, girls, you know a little bit about the history, but Alex, sometimes I feel that eaten bread is soon forgotten and that girls tend to say, oh, feminism, oh, it's all fine, we're all very equal now, that was just a thing in the past, and nearly treat it like a dirty word. So I'll ask your opinion first and then Orla's opinion on that.
So definitely I think that occasionally feminism can be used as a dirty word in our society, and I think that's the input of like the toxicity from social media. But I think in Alex, like, they really help us like set aside the right like values and like determine what's like acceptable and like where we stand as a society. And I think it's like nice for us, as we're so well educated here, to be able to like contribute that information to like our friends and family like that aren't as well educated on the matter.
Right, that's brilliant and it's very affirming. Orla, what about you? Or are you like sort of indifferent on it, or are you committed to it as an ideal? Feminism being equality between the genders.
I do agree that it can be used as a dirty word because of, social media. And whenever I think people think of feminism, they really think of the extreme, the what we see really on social media. But I think we need to remember like where it came from, and it was really to get like basic rights. And I think that it is vital that women are educated as equal as men. And I think that's really important.
I definitely think as well, there's like, the way I view it is, I don't view people, like, I know the anatomy of it, yeah, we have different genders, but I don't view people as genders. Like, we're all like everyone has the right to education. Like we're all just people. Like I don't think it should be a matter of like a woman or a man in the workforce or anything. It's just up to your ability. Like I don't think if you were going to judge someone, say for instance, if you're going to judge someone for a position in a play, a singing role, and it had nothing to do with gender, you would just pick the person that's best equipped for the ability. Whereas I think a lot in our society, like it's just fundamental things that we base someone's ability off their gender, which like I don't think is adequate as to like what a true reflection of us as people.
Absolutely. And the glass ceiling still exists. And people often say, well, I've heard people say, excuse me, there is equality, but there really isn't. Like the three of you could be sitting at a desk beside a man doing exactly the same hours or more and being paid on average 25% less. That is reality. So when people say, oh, we've achieved equality, we don't need this battle, like the civil rights movement, Black Lives Matter, the Northern Ireland civil rights movement, the protest and the passion needed to overcome inequality is just as relevant for women, and it is as relevant today. So, Orla, I don't know, would you agree with that, or do you feel, oh, we've achieved quite a level playing field, or do you believe there's a long way to go yet?
I think that we have achieved a lot since the first wave of feminism, but I think I also find it difficult. I mean, not difficult. I find it different from where, we're here in Alex and we're so fortunate to have education to really, we are very, very privileged people. And I think where feminism really lacks is in, these cultures where the woman stays at home, the woman doesn't work, or societies where, the woman is seen as a second gender, the second sex, as Simone de Beauvoir says. But I think that we need to keep on fighting for these girls because, as a Western society, we have achieved a lot. There's still a bit to go, but we've achieved way more than what other societies around the world have and have not achieved.
Excellent, exactly. And that is the case in a lot of ways, but in other ways, we're still not there. We're a long way off. What do you think, Alex?
I definitely think that, we've come a fair amount away, like since the beginning, but I think we're only really like on like, what's the phrase? Touching the glass, tipping the glass, the top of the iceberg, tip of the iceberg. Because if you look at how our world like developed economically, like just structurally, we've come so far, and yeah, women have a lot more rights than they did, but on the grand scheme, we're just not where we should be, I think. And I think what's quite upsetting is for all of the like important matters on the human rights, we have to face a great like upset to realize this. Like for example, the Rwandan genocide. The Rwanda was awful. They had no rights for women, and it was only when they had no one left that they realized, oh, women are well capable of doing this. And now it's like one of the most progressive countries, but they had to face so much tragedy in order to learn that, which I just think is really upsetting.
It's the same in this part of the world because post World War One, when the women ran ambulances, did surgeries, were mechanics, it was actually the first time women were allowed to wear trousers, by the way. So post World War One, when the generation started to rejuvenate, it became patriarchal again. So women were put back in their box, and that was post first wave of feminism too. World War Two, what happened was the women said, no, you're not putting us back in our box. In places like America, the 50s for women was horrendous. They were Stepford wives. They were only allowed cook, clean, produce heirs. They were really quite aggressively treated. So women rebelled in the 60s, and that was the second wave of feminism, and said, we deserve our rights to do everything. And yes, we've travelled a long way, and the points about culture are very relevant. Look at the Taliban now denying girls school. Why? Because they do not want girls to be able to see for themselves by being educated. They are totally being discriminated against. But Ireland, It's come a very long way, but yet we've a very long way to go. So I have a mantra: if not you, then who? So I strongly believe, and you two might disagree with this, or you might say, oh, well, that's putting too much on us. But I believe if Alex girls can't engage with feminism in its purest form, meaning equality, and standing up for it, and, actually being passionate about it, who would? Who else around this country would? Like, you're the forerunners for the world for women's education. You're up there. If you open any feminist text round the world, as I did in Harvard in America, say, Alex is there first because we're A. Yay. So we're top of the alphabet. But, like, if Alex girls, especially, won't engage, if not you, then who? Do you think that's been a bit harsh, Orla, or you? Would you agree with that? Or have you come across people going, oh, enough, like Alex talks about it too much?
I mean, I have heard that of, we talk about it a lot, but, you know, our school does represent, all girls school that, was the first to give girls education, and that's part of who we are. And I think that when it's in, whether you like it or not, whether you knew it coming to the school, you realize that, before I came to this school, I didn't really have an opinion, or I didn't really know about this. And now I find it much more important, much more, like, I know so much more about it that it makes me want to help more. But then I can't do that alone. I get that one voice makes a difference, but in a world that's so big with so many people that have such strong opinions, and, like societies, they said, like the Taliban and stuff like that, I think that as a whole we should all work together, and not just women. There's lots of men feminists in the world, but I think we should really spread the message that it's not just about equality, it's not just about, being all the same. It's about also you're feeling safe, you're feeling appreciated, and you feel that you're also human. You're not just a woman. When we talk about artists, we talk about, for example, the Impressionists, and then you talk about the female Impressionists, which is completely different to the Impressionists, whether they did the same thing, but they're not put under the same label because one is a female and the others are just men. Just one are men. So I think that the goals are different, and we should all strive for equality together, not just, women.
Alex?
I agree that we should, with Orla, when she says we should strive for equality together. I think quite often it's like in our society, you kind of congratulations for women for achieving such high goals or like high positions, and it's like, oh my god, congratulations. Like, for example, like they've never had a woman as a president in the United States, and like just something as simple as that's just something for younger generations to like look up to. And without seeing your representation, subconsciously you just feel inadequate. And I think definitely it's a generational thing, because I think the older generations of maybe like our parents are less educated of the matter, and that obviously kind of foreplays down onto our generation, and it's what you teach your kids and your values that you keep in the home that kind of set the foreground for like how you're going to be as a human. And I think definitely everyone needs to tackle it personally before we can tackle it as a world problem, because I don't know.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, Ola, great point. I know there's more of awareness now of toxic masculinity, and that actually goes back to the time of suffragettes. So Hannah Sheehy Skeffington is a very famous feminist, but her husband fought every inch of the way to get the right to vote for women. And I think Alex's point about a female American president like Hillary Clinton, I've read her book, it's fascinating, highly recommend it. She said ultimately in the last few days leading up to the vote, they turned her femininity against her, and they used it as a weapon to say ultimately she will be too emotional. She's too much of a woman. She'll look out for women's rights like abortion and those sort of gay rights, and they really did a number on her and used that as a weapon. And she would say herself that was the turning point in the last 3 weeks of polling. And then they went ahead and chose Donald Trump, now convicted sex offender. Are we, where are we going with that? Politics, I think, is one of the last graveyards for equality. Because even in the Dáil, and you two are doing politics, I better not put you on the spot. Maybe I will. I think it's only about 13% women. So all the laws that we all have to subscribe to are basically formulated by men. I have to say that does, offend me, worry me, and we see it in action far too often. I don't know what you two feel about that.
Well, as a politics student, we actually recently had an interview with she's from the Green Party, Eva Dowling, representative, and she was even just speaking on a little bit on feminism in the party, and our party leader is a man, and he's really allowing for the fact she's had 2 children, but so she's been on maternity leave and stuff, and it's really hard in politics. I think that's one of the biggest struggles is often women have to choose between their career and their personal life, and it's not of a matter of fact that they don't care about their career. It's just simply it's a lot harder for them to have such a successful career because of the nature of our anatomy, and that we have to breed and produce children. And say in politics, you can't just replace a politician, you can't just replace the president if they're on maternity leave. But then equally, is it it's not rightful and just to not allow someone to have the right to their maternity leave and not have time with their family. So I think it's really we just completely set way too high standards and way too hard of obstacles for women to overcome, especially in the political sense. Personally, I think I have a bit of a different view of how, I don't know, a mother would be, as my coming from my home. My mum is probably the most hardworking woman I know. She both my parents are equally hardworking, but it's always a joke. You go to your dad, the man of the house. But I've always viewed my mother as the woman of the house. She's the boss man, And I just think that, it's in society quite often I think women themselves don't have the confidence to bestowed on them that they can have a successful job and be really successful in their field whilst also maintaining a household and having valuable time with your children. And obviously my mum might have had to sacrifice certain things with me growing up just because she's a consultant in the hospital, so she does have to work quite long hours. But because of those sacrifices, she's really bestowed really good fundamental hardworking views in me, and really taught me that it's okay to put yourself first and prioritize your needs and what you want, because you're paving the way for the generations to come.
Very good. What about you, Orla?
For example, if I'm talking with my mum and sometimes I say, oh, I don't really feel like having children, it's the son, what? Why? It's the most beautiful thing in the world. It's not you have to have children, but it really makes you, even my sister has 2 children, and I was looking at the babies, what are those? They look like aliens. And she was like, no, but they're beautiful, and you want to have children, and really it's something, that you kind of feel like you have to do because you're a woman and it's a unique experience, and, everyone lives it differently. But then at the same time, there's this thing of, you are a woman, you can do what the men can do, so go and do what men can do and be the breadwinner and, do all these things. And as women, we're really good at multitasking, but these are very big things to do. And I feel especially in our society where women are expected to do, I feel more in a way, but then at the same time, we are expected to do more, but not as much as men because they're put on a pedestal. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
Makes total sense. It's, it is that dual-edged sword. And this is where, again, people will throw feminism at you and say, well, you want your cake and eat it. But as you say, men just don't have to factor in, well, if I have a child, how many months out from a job am I? Is somebody going to step into my shoes while I'm out and discriminate against me, which we've had. We've had that in this country, where people on mat leave have come back and they've found they've diminished responsibilities or they're treated differently. So, that happens in Ireland as well. So it is an extra dimension for women. And as well, because women have been given birth later in life and have had that freedom with medical advances. But there's also been, they have been denigrated for that in some ways too. And it has been like, oh, is that a risk? Should you not be having your babies earlier? So I do think it's an added pressure. And as Alex says, like, it means there are more sacrifices for women in that regard.
I think that's why it's so upsetting that it's such a controversial topic on the, like, if you don't want to have children, or if you don't feel yourself is ready, or you just don't think your mind or your body can withhold it. Like the fact that in my household, I was brought up in the view of, like your body, your choice, and the whole referendum. I remember having a conversation with a priest actually, and he was, yeah, he was quite confused as to why I was so not nonchalant about the fact of, oh yeah, if I want an abortion, I can get one, that type of view, and he didn't understand why. And for me, I could, like, age 12, I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that people would have the option. Someone who doesn't even have your anatomy, and someone who doesn't even have the opportunity to withhold a child, and then not only are you holding a child for 9 months, you might be having fertility issues leading up, you could have miscarriages, your body could not, maybe your body isn't able to hold it, maybe your mind, like baby blues is like a really serious condition for people, and sometimes you just can't put yourself through that multiple times. And the fact that someone thinks they have the right to tell you what you can and can't do with your body for your own sake, I just think is quite baffling that people think, and it's still such a controversial topic. Like if you were in the north of Ireland, you wouldn't even be able to go to, like if you didn't, like if I got pregnant right now and I lived in the north, I wouldn't even be able to go and have an abortion and I'm doing the leaving cert, like I can't have a baby.
Because it goes back to patriarchal privilege. It goes back to middle-aged old men deciding what is best for all of us, not just with our reproductive health, but as you say, Orla, in terms of where can you go with work, what is your maternity leave going to look like, is it paid for, how long it is. This is all where inequality does kick in, because it is a large cohort of males deciding this for females, and that's where, to me, it's not very equal. So that's where, again, if people say, oh, we've come so far, well, we have and we haven't. And Orla, when you said about one voice doesn't make a difference, go back to Dr. Maya Angelou, Still I Rise. I am a black wave welling and swelling in the tide. So it goes back to numbers, and it goes back to coalescing and becoming a proper, united, educated form of not just protest, but opening people's eyes, I think.
I think it definitely is a lack of education that is keeping this still alive in our world, especially in developing countries. If you move over to Africa, and if you have a look around, even India, everywhere, just the developing countries and kind of like people with less privilege, it's just so instilled into them that it's society, like it's accepted in society, especially on the topics of stuff like FGM, female genital mutilation. That is such a, I know it's viewed as something sacred and like ritual, but if you look at the actual health risks, and it's men installing that, it's not women for their own, it's for men's pleasure only.
Yeah, so I think the root of the problem of, not problem feminists, but where this whole thing of women are lesser than men, comes from that we give birth, and that was the only thing that we're seeing that we were able to do, because what we do is give birth, and that was that was it. And I think that with you know even in India, like, we went to this hospital and there was this sign saying if you were gonna get a radio or something, and you're pregnant, the doctor by law was not allowed to tell you if it was a girl or a boy, because if it was a girl, well, then there's a risk of abortion or kingdom, or however they feel like doing with it. So I feel like there's still this thing in certain cultures that if you have a girl, well, then it's up to her to pay to get into the family or to get kind of rid of her as fast as possible because it's a burden, or it's just she's just there to give birth. Or every time, like, we hear in royal families of, more ancient, that like, you have to provide me with an heir. They're always, you have to provide, like, she can't just decide like, yep, I'm just gonna give you a boy and happy out, like, there's this thing of so much pressure, but it's just nature, and nature's natural. You can't force nature. And I feel like this whole feminine aspect of us is more and more forced, if you know what I mean.
No, that's absolutely true. There've been 9 million abortions in India since 1974, and it's all been females. It's called female fanticide, and it doesn't exist for the males. China has parts of their population that are utterly unbalanced now. They call the boys little emperors, so the one-child policy, they were killing off girls. They were allowing them to be born, putting them out in windowsills and allowing them to die, and keeping going till they had boys. So, it's modern as well. As I say, the Taliban have stepped straight in and tried to utterly repress their girls and ensure they're not educated. So 5 years ago now, I did a English course in Oxford University, and Christopher, one of the dons, did a speech on women's education, and he actually acknowledged me. I had been chatting to him. He said, and there's someone here from Alex who was so innovative. And he said, of course, we didn't want women to be educated. We've never wanted women to be educated. We wanted to be able to keep them in the dark. So he got a great laugh, but it's sort of true as well. So I'm very glad to know that feminism isn't a dirty word and that it's alive and well and thriving. And I think we do recognise our past there and our current obligation. Well, I hope so. I mean, obviously, the girls in Ellsford Terrace had a massive, massive obligation to, and they must have been under such stress if you think back about it, girls. Like, they had to shoulder that burden and prove that girls were good enough. So without that kind of constraint, I suppose it would be natural that our current ethos or our current buy-in to our ethos mightn't be as strong. But it's fantastic to hear from you two that it is. It's very affirming, I have to say. And it's good to know that, like, we still will speak up for women's rights in the best sense, most positive sense.
I think one of the main issues as well, sorry, it's just coming backtracking a few points, but is when you were saying of kind of women and being like kind of viewed as weak or like almost second class citizens, has a lot to do with like how we've like rooted in religion. If you take, for example, like Judaism, yeah, the way if you're an Orthodox Jew, you can't sleep in the same bed as your husband if you're menstruating. You have to be blessed by the rabbi if you're menstruating. It's really viewed as women, and they will state it's not that you're unclean, but it just does kind of paint and portray a photo of uncleanliness when it's like a natural thing for a woman to do. And I think if you switch the genders, this were to be switched on its head and it'd be men, I think it would be a completely different story. And I definitely think that religion plays a big part in the fact of, like Mary is like this divine feminine, and the Virgin Mary is so sacred, and everything is so taboo when it comes to women and expressing their sexuality and like their femininity, whereas men it's kind of expected. Like in the ancient days, it was almost expected for your husband to have affairs. However, if a woman was deemed impure, she was just left untouched. Like it wasn't acceptable.
Absolutely. It goes back to Adam and Eve. Eve was the seductress, the temptress, and anything to do with sex is always portrayed as dirty and female driven. And like that attitude still exists amongst a lot of organised religions. Then too many organised religions are utterly dominated by middle-aged and old men.
Sure, it's even in Macbeth, her and her big unsex me now. She's asking God to get rid of her feminine features in order for her to be able to fulfill such a manly and terrorist act.
Yeah, And unfortunately, that attitude still prevails to a large degree.
Yeah, like I think in religion, what I find interesting, like it never really says anywhere that women are the second, because when if you look at the Bible, for example, in Christianity, when you look at the Bible, it says that, you know, men and women, like all men are equal and they're all created to God's creature. Like everyone is equal, and there's this thing of, we're all so different, but we're all so equal. And I think somehow this is misinterpreted to say that actually men are, higher than women, which I don't know where the misinterpretation came from.
I think it's really interesting the way as well, if you look at how like women in the 21st century can view past things, because like in terms of like viewing women, like the mother and baby homes, for instance. Paula Meehan, sorry, referencing so much English here, really studying hard for my name research. But Paula Meehan, in her poem, The Statue of Granite Speaks, it's based on Anne Lovett, who, if you don't know, 1984, one of my favourite poems, different poem, not about Paula Meehan, but about a girl who 15 and gives birth at a grotto and dies, and the baby's stillborn. And it's kind of a poem almost like, I think, criticising Catholic religion for the fact that the statue itself is watching this child in pain. And I think it's a great point to the values, that the value of the Catholic Church is to kind of like protect all and like love thy neighbour or whatnot. However, they're so fast to criticise someone that falls out of line. And I don't think if someone was on their knees crying, giving birth, like dying, I don't think anyone, well, any sane person could like deny them help. And it's a really interesting like concept to look at how in previous years how like looked down upon these women were, that people were willing to leave them to die in order and to hide this horrible sin that they've committed in order to protect the like perception of the Catholic Church.
Absolutely. And which bishop lately said God wanted only men for priests. I mean, Catholic vocations are dying. They're dying on their feet, rightly. They're asking them to be celibate, and we've seen with the clerical sex abuse that isn't natural. It's not a part of humanity. And they're, denying them a natural part of their humanity. And they also ask them to live these, idealised, isolated lives. And then they're wondering why they've no vocations. And they will not admit women. Unlike some of, like, say, Anglicans who've got their women bishops and everything. But it will backlash on them. And I remember, Annie Lovett, that I was a child of that time, Alex. I remember being horrified, absolutely horrified. But I come from an Irish country background, and I know because one of the neighbours where my mum lived in Mullymucks, which is a small little hamlet, one of the neighbours was pregnant out of wedlock. And my granddad wouldn't let that child over the threshold because he was a devout. It was horrendous. But that's not a million years ago. That's like 30 odd years ago. So, yeah, I think organised religion has an awful lot to do with institutionalised misogyny. And it's great that you guys can see it and call it out.
I think it's definitely like the devout Catholic is quite a, well, personally, I view it, obviously it's like a gorgeous thing to have such a community for people to like find peace in, but I think often the old Irish devout Catholics can be quite a toxic community. I know even my mother went to Alex, good few years now, but she was a Catholic in a Protestant school, and even that was looked down upon in her community. And I was like obviously eternally grateful to my granddad for like choosing that and standing up for that, even though he was himself a Catholic.
Absolutely. When my mum and dad got married, mum was an Irish Catholic, and my dad was an English Protestant, and they got married in 1962. And my Irish granddad tried to stop the wedding, and he boycotted it. My Irish grandmother, good devout Catholic mother of 7, defied everyone and went to it. And I think both my mum and dad brought us up in a very liberal way to try and look beyond all those sort of discriminatory boundaries. because of their own experiences. So finally, guys, just this is a big question. I'm very interested to know from both of you what it's like to, the sort of pressures you're under, or where you're at being a woman in 2023, and has Alex ethos been in any way formative there?
Personally, I view this, femininity as two completely separate. So I've got, the Alex ethos and being in school and, thriving to do best and thriving to, you know, learn as much as I can and, find what I want to do in life. But there's also kind of, the private, but at the same time, public aspect of it with social media, which I think me as a teenager, 17-year-old teenage girl, it really affects me because suddenly I'm not just, I have my friends and my family, but now I'm open to this whole world of so many different people around the world of, now I'm talking about like body types and stuff like that. And I feel like as a girl, more and more, there's this kind of goal to be stereotypically, like slim and fit and pretty, but then smart, but then you should study, but then you should go to parties and, like this thing, this thing, I don't know if you agree with me, Alex, this thing of like, you should be everything, but then be super, everything should be organized. And especially with like social media apps like TikTok, Instagram, stuff like that, I can see it personally more and more. And that's why I delete TikTok, because I just can't stand this like stereotype thing anymore. It's it's horrible. But yeah, I just feel that, I'm not, like, I'm glad I have education and I don't take it, like, I don't really take it for granted, but at the same time, like, I shouldn't take it, like, I feel like,
it's opened your eyes and ears to being able to balance it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like in my private life, growing up with the family ethos I have, I mean, I'm with my older sister has, she was in the army reserve for like the marine and very, like strong. And then my other sister is, quite different. She's really into the arts and like expressing herself. And we all have very different viewpoints in the family, which I think has really built the person I am today. But I don't think it's the same for every family. And I feel like being a woman today, personally, I feel like I'm strong and I feel like I can do as much as men and everything. But there is this aspect of, as I said before, as safety and stuff like that, where I don't always feel safe. And if, let's say, I mean, I don't have a boyfriend or anything, but in the future, if I date and stuff, I always have this fear of, like him cheating or stuff like that. Because, I've encountered so many times where, for example, my best friend, her dad has cheated on his wife for 7 years and no one knew about it, and so many things that like that men think that they are able to do because they're men and that's what they're allowed to do. I think personally that has affected me, and but in an educational way, I think Alex has made me stronger. And football for me was for guys, and I got told once that Orla, why are you doing soccer? Because the girls are so bad technically and the guys are so much better at footwork. So that was ingrained in my head, and I was like, oh, okay. And then when I met, like Mr. C and stuff, and I started doing soccer. I love soccer, even though I'm not not very good at it. But like Mr. C, who is a man himself, really encouraged it, and I feel I really like admire that. And all these sports, and Alex is not just about education; it's about like the arts and drama and sport and everything. I think Alex has really made me who I am in my educational side, and I think, of course, the other aspect has nothing to do with the school, and I think really has to be improved through the world changing.
I agree with you, Orla, in the fact that I think Alex really has opened up, not even just like the topic of it, but just instilled a sense of confidence in people. I think our school has a really good ethos in instilling confidence in girls to speak up and, feel comfortable. Like, I know if I were to be in a different school, I don't think I'd be half as confident as I am. And sure, I'll talk to anyone now just because that's the type of work we do in the school. And I think like this is such a safety net that we're so privileged to have, that you can express your sexuality in any way you want. You can express your sense of femininity or your lack thereof. You can be whoever you want in the safety of these four walls. And if someone has a problem with it, it's called out, and it's there. We like educate people on it, and we don't put shame upon anyone for being who they are. And I like appreciate that a lot, because I know that like I have friends at home in like similar situations where like I don't dress completely feminine all the time, and people will be like, oh, at home they'll be like, oh, do you not get slagged? Like, are people like not calling you gay? And I was like, well, so what? Like so what if they do? You know, like Alex really like instills that sense of confidence in you to be who you are, and like you be yourself shamelessly, because there's only one you in the world. Like no one else is going to be. What's that? Mr. Barrett has a quote he's been saying. I'm going to get it up really fast, guys.
Meantime, I'd just say that's one of the most affirming things I've ever heard, Alex. And I'm 35 years here, and had someone said to me, what's the very best of Alexandra College Dublin, I would have always said from day one that we find everyone's niche, and we try and make everyone be their best self, and we try and nurture that. So it's just brilliant hearing that. Absolutely brilliant.
Found the quote. As Mr. Barrett so famously said, nobody ever needs to find themselves. They just need to be themselves.